Just 24 hours, not even, after an overtime game 1,200 miles away last night, Danny Green and the 76ers are in the Windy City. Who's that? Decked out in camouflage and all, tough to make out, but perhaps it could be Seth Curry. Great game for the Sixers against the Spurs yesterday. Exiting what I would argue is the only hotel in the NBA where you can smell the wafts of deep dish pizza, literally coming from next door at a Giordano's in the Loop. Benjamin City, he is there after the tip-in last night. He and the 76ers back at it at United Center this evening as the Sixers will look to extend their current winning streak, the longest active winning streak in the Eastern Conference, and they look to go to 2-0 on this 3-game road trip. Welcome into 7-6 Live Countdown. I thought we were kind of done, Lauren Rosen, with these later nights after that most recent West Coast trip about 4 weeks ago. I forgot about this sneaky 9 o'clock Eastern Monday night Chicago game.
This one snuck up on us, Seltz. I didn't even know that this one existed. I'll be honest with you. I woke up this morning to a little bit of a surprise, scheduling wise. And it makes sense, of course, that the team had a difficult back-to-back to face, playing at 8 o'clock Eastern in San Antonio last night, now getting ready to play again, I suppose, at 9 o'clock Eastern. It makes sense, but do I love it? Can't lie to you, Seltz. It's not my fave.
Well, one thing that we do love and is great to see the standings in the Eastern Conference going into tonight's action on this Monday, May the 3rd, because we know this. Lauren provides us with the updates when pertinent, and this morning warranted said pertinent update.
It has been a minute since I have had the distinct privilege of posting a screenshot from Google of the Eastern Conference standings with the Sixers right up top. I only post the screenshot if the Sixers are holding that top spot, and it's been a little over a week now, so I was really excited to get to reactivate that habit. The people seem to love it. It's low-hanging fruit. I am happy to provide whenever I can.
Here's the thing about low-hanging fruit. It's edible and sometimes delicious, very ripe, excellent, things you want to consume. So let's not bog ourselves down in negative stigmatism with low-hanging fruit. Sometimes we need low-hanging fruit. It's the most available.
Well, there you go. The good morning to Sixers fans tweets are the low hanging fruit of my Twitter, and I'm glad everybody seems to think that it's so juicy.
It was an interesting game for the 76ers last night in San Antonio, 1,200 miles south of where the Sixers are tonight, taking on the Chicago Bulls at United Center. Sixers did survive in the Alamo City. They eked out a 113-111 win in overtime. Ben Simmons, of course, with the tip in right at the buzzer. He just barely made it and got the tip in off. And it was an important win for the 76ers because it vaulted them, Lauren, back into control of their own destiny in the East. And we know with the way things are shaking out in the Eastern Conference landscape this season, it's important for any one of those three teams, very desirous to get that number one seed.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we know that if it works out this way, regardless rather of who is in that one seed, they only have to play one of the other two teams en route to the finals. So if the Sixers hold on to the one seed, they will likely face Milwaukee or Brooklyn, but not both. And that does mean a lot when the landscape is as such with these three great teams up top. Of course, Brooklyn losing yesterday, paving the way for the Sixers to take over that number one spot in this overtime victory. And Celtics, they led by 17 in this one. I don't think there was a Sixer on this bench that was thrilled to go to overtime, but what matters is that they made it happen at the end, and they headed north with a victory.
The Sixers, between Joel Embiid, Seth Curry, who you see here stroking another three, and Dwight Howard, who formed the wall, and then with a big block right there, they just dominated in that first quarter and the first half. They were getting great production from the outside from Curry. Joel Embiid and Dwight Howard were having their way inside. They capitalized on some transition scoring opportunities. They were in total control. But then as the game went on, the Spurs battled back, and all of a sudden, the Sixers had a game on their hands.
It did get a little bit too close for comfort at the end there. In fact, it did get too close for comfort at the end there. Ben Simmons was a little bit willing to say that this was something that could have been productive for the team, but the bottom line was they wanted to get to Chicago 5 minutes of gameplay sooner than they were able to do so.
Dwight Howard continuing to look so youthful and ageless out there after coming off a 19-point double-double the previous game. He had another double-double last night. And Ben Simmons might not have put up the gaudiest of numbers, as we see here diming out Seth Curry. But as the game went along, especially in that overtime period, Simmons took on such a critical role and came up with huge plays. And what a connection that was between the two vets, George Hill and Dwight Howard.
Yeah, no doubt, Celts. We talk about this a lot, but Ben's stat line almost never tells the full story. In fact, I would argue that it never does tell the full story. When you look at what he's able to do on defense, intangibles like drawing 2 huge charges in overtime that Doc Rivers called the biggest plays of the game, those don't show up on the stat line. And sure, his scoring wasn't high, but he ultimately had the winning basket, and that means something. Ben Simmons was great again last night, getting his teammates involved, and he's looked really good since he's come back from that 4-game non-COVID illness out.
Even taking a look at those 2 prior plays that we just saw between Tobias Harris scoring and then Seth Curry, Ben being used as an effective, successful screener right there. So there are little things that Ben does so well. And there, of course, the biggest moment of the night, getting it in just in the nick of time, a tip at the horn. Celebration in San Antonio, or perhaps, as Doc Rivers Lawrence said afterwards, not celebration, relief.
It was certainly a very relieved vibe when you heard from any of them. The celebration was nice, but a little bit business-like. I think it's a little different from if you were to win in overtime in a game that was maybe contentious all the way through. This one, not one of those. But a game winner in overtime is still a game winner in overtime, which is what I told Ben Simmons after the game, and I know we're going to hear from him in a little bit. So he still deserves props for making that shot go in, but of course, not exactly how they drew it up on the night.
Tom McGinnis and I talked about this after the game last night on the radio, that there were not a lot of style points in the win last night. It was a game that got way more tight and competitive than, like you said, Lauren, anyone probably would have expected or hoped for. But I still think there is something to be said for a trait that continues to show itself throughout this season for the Sixers team, and it's reflected in the stat you see at the bottom of your screen. The Sixers have the best winning percentage in the NBA in clutch games, which are games decided less than 5 points within the final 5 minutes. And the 31 clutch games the Sixers have played this season, that's a high volume number relative to the rest of the teams in the league. And look at their winning percentage. It's the best in the league. They have the second most clutch wins at 23.
And look, it's a skill that could end up being valuable down the stretch. We've said it a few times now. That was a game that was closer than they wanted it to be, but playoff games are close. Playoff games are contentious. Playoff games go to overtime. And this is a team that's had experience in winning in a variety of ways, with certain guys available, certain guys unavailable, good teams, bad teams. They've come down the stretch and found a way to make it happen. It's something they've prided themselves in being able to do all season long. And if you want to add last night's game in San Antonio to that running list of close victories, we can do that.
Seth Curry was huge in getting the 76ers off to a great start last night. He finished with 22 points, his second 20-plus point game in his last 3 outings. And afterwards, he talked about the 76ers banding together, Ben Simmons getting the tip in, and leaving San Antonio with the win.
I mean, huge plays. There's a lot of stuff on the floor, a lot of different stuff. It's an effective game as he makes a cameo. So, those two huge plays for us down the stretch, and then obviously making a play off of a play that wasn't for him. Just continue to stick with it, and it was good to get out of there instead of going to another overtime.
That is certainly a great point, not to be lost amongst all this. It was not a double overtime game.
And it could have been. It felt there for a second like it was going to be. So thanks, of course, to Ben Simmons for saving them from another 5 minutes on what's already a little bit of a difficult back-to-back.
Somehow it's taken us about 10 minutes to bring up the name Joel Embiid, Lauren. in terms of what he did in last night's game for the Sixers. 34 points and 12 rebounds, both of those numbers team highs for the Sixers. And especially in the beginning of the game, there was absolutely no answer that San Antonio had for Joel. He was getting whatever he wanted. And even though he didn't hit a possible winning shot at the end of regulation, and he also missed that jumper with time winding down in overtime that led to the Ben Simmons tip in, Joe made some key baskets in the fourth quarter to keep the Sixers in front with the lead and make sure that San Antonio didn't ever overtake the Sixers.
4 of the team's 6 points in overtime as well. He did a really good job of coming back into a game that perhaps he might have thought he was going to get to rest for the duration of, and ended up having to come back into the game. But yes, he made his impact early. He made his impact late. And this isn't a game. I mean, maybe it would have been, but the Sixers don't win this game without Joel Embiid playing the way that he did down the stretch.
Just tenacious on the interior. Ultimately, it seemed like the Spurs were able to find an option on their roster to help contain Joel a little bit in Gorgie Jang. But Joel, whether it was throwing down at the rim or knocking down some smooth jump shots like this on the baseline, he had it going on, especially late. So I thought he played great. And then again, I know Ben Simmons didn't put up eye popping numbers, but if you watch that overtime period, you can't deny how big of a role that he, like his fellow All-Star Joel Embiid, played in the final outcome.
Well, the two of them combined for all the Sixers points in that overtime period. So shout out to the two of them for making it happen. They've played really well lately. Doc Rivers talked about their relationship just moments ago, saying that there are absolutely no problems there. And he's been really pleased to find out how well the two of them can coexist on and off the court. We've seen it all season long.
And I think in a game as close as last night's was, tight, tense down the stretch in overtime, yes, free throws qualify as highlights that we have to put in the highlight package. We're starting to get that time of year, Lauren, when free throws become highlights. It's almost playoff time.
I am willing to accept that wholeheartedly. Speaking of a free throw highlight, shout out to Dwight Howard going 4 for 4 from the free throw line yesterday. That's something he's put a lot of emphasis on. Daryl Morey pushing him a little bit on Twitter to hit those free throws. So good to see that he's able to do it in clutch situations.
Here's the other thing, too. Doc Rivers was talking about this about 30 minutes ago on the pregame media Zoom, just how he thinks, I'm pretty sure this is what he was saying. You can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's important for teams that are trying to make deep runs in the playoffs to play meaningful basketball games at this time of year. And since that Bucks game, quite frankly, those opportunities have been few and far between for the Sixers. And if you look at the schedule that lies ahead, there may not be a lot of opportunities for the Sixers to be in the type of scenario that they were in last night. So a game where it seemed like they were up big, possibly going to win in a blowout, became very hard fought down the stretch where execution mattered. Little things were significant. And even though the Sixers only scored a basket in overtime, one field goal, and that was at the buzzer with the tip in from Ben, what else was apparent? You have your most dominant player as arguably your best free throw shooter, and he shoots in volume. So the fact that Joe got to the line positioned the Sixers to take that game.
And Joel has also been putting a ton of pressure on himself to improve at the line. He's been great this year. He beats himself up anytime he misses one. He does call them free throws. He says they're free for a reason, and he cashed in on those free opportunities in that overtime period.
After the game last night, we'll hear a little bit more from Ben Simmons in a bit with Lauren. But Simmons, speaking about the 76ers reclaiming first place all to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's where we want to be. I mean, we still got to worry about ourselves and what we can do, and everything else will handle itself. So that's just getting wins. You know, the more we win, the better chance we give ourselves.
Very solid mindset from Ben Simmons, who finished with 5 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and a couple of steals in the win, 113-111 in overtime at San Antonio last night. And then, as you've alluded to, Lauren, this schedule, this pocket of the schedule, just crazy for the Sixers. They were on a plane and did not get into Chicago until the wee hours of this morning.
Doc Rivers has not been shy about expressing the fact that he understands that this is a crazy season, that there were a lot of intangibles to consider when putting together the schedule, but he's not a huge fan of what the team has to do in this 3-day period, which, as a reminder, started in San Antonio last night. They had to make their way up to Chicago to play tonight. And then after tonight's game, I assume, go straight back down to Texas. The distance between San Antonio and Houston, it's not far. As a Texas native, I can tell you it is not a long drive. It is certainly a short flight. So to have to squeeze Chicago in between two cities that are already pretty close together, I understand why it's not that appealing.
I think you'd have to be hard pressed to find any set of circumstances under which Chicagoland native Doc Rivers would not want to get back to his hometown. He still has family there, including his brother. Uh, but for this back to back, it might be one of them. Doc Rivers was asked about the scheduling for this back to back after the game last night.
Yeah, it's just the worst scheduling of the year. Um, you know, we are 45 minutes from Houston, and we're gonna fly to Chicago and play Chicago and then fly back to Houston. It makes no sense, but it is what it is. I'm sure every team has had one of these or two of these during the year, and we're just gonna have to, buck up and win the game anyway.
And I think it's important to note that Doc's not saying that the act of the scheduling in and of itself was the worst in the entire league. I think he's saying that in the context of the Sixers schedule, this is the most challenging stretch right here because, as he acknowledged, we've talked about this too. Every team does invariably have some stretch of their schedule that's geographically wonky and that sort of thing. And just so happens that this is the Sixers right now.
And you'd imagine that a little bit of that frustration might come from the high density of tough opponents that the Sixers just got done playing. So to now have a couple lighter opponents, a few lighter opponents in a row, but have to do it on this weird travel-y back-to-back makes what should be easy games pretty difficult. So again, understand that frustration. I agree with you, Seltz. I don't think he's shading the league saying that this is the hardest anyone's had to deal with, but to say that it's the hardest that the Sixers have had to deal with this season, I think makes a lot of sense.
Fair statement indeed. Ben Simmons, though, when we heard him, he was pumped, ready to go, wants to keep it rolling, was, all the more willing to get on a flight and head up to Chicago for tonight's game. According to Doc, a few moments ago, he said that all players in the Sixers roster, as far as he knows, are available for tonight's game. But this is the stat, the correlation that cannot be denied. 76ers last week went 4-0 with Ben Simmons. The week before that, Lauren, they went 0-4.
That is true. You are speaking facts today, Seltz. Ben Simmons cannot be, his importance to this team should not continue to be underestimated. If anything, just look at these last 2 weeks. Ben, of course, did have that game-winning tip. He had what Doc Rivers called the two biggest plays of the game and his two charges that he drew in overtime. I asked him about both post-game last night.
And Doc said that those two charges in overtime were the biggest plays of the game. You have spoken a lot this season about the fact that your stat line doesn't always tell the whole story, and I think tonight is sort of a perfect example of that. Can you tell us about those little things you did, particularly in overtime, to make sure that the team won?
Yeah, I wanted to get in the plane and get to Chicago. But I was just doing what I could, whatever I could at the time with my team, defensively and offensively, just trying to make the right plays. So I noticed, they were going away from me, trying to get the ball away from me, and getting somebody else involved. So, I saw a couple opportunities where I could, make plays and try to do that.
And then can you just take us through your memory of that last play? Because I know it wasn't the way you guys wanted to win, but a buzzer beater in overtime is still a buzzer beater in overtime. So can you just tell us a little about it?
I knew Joe was going to get a good look. And, we trust him with those shots. So I was just there to clean it up.
Thank you, Ben.
Ben talks a lot about the fact that his highest priority this season has been doing whatever it takes for the team to win. That was just so clear in the overtime period last night as he made it happen on both ends of the floor. If you're just joining us now, I've seen some comments about availability tonight. As far as we know, Doc Rivers is anticipating full availability for the 76ers tonight. I know, Seltz, we're about to talk about the Chicago Bulls, but we also learned that Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine both out tonight for the Bulls.
Second straight night for the 76ers, certainly a recurring theme within the last couple of weeks. The Sixers are dodging opponents with some of their top talent available. So you remove two All-Stars from the Bulls, and you would think that that would certainly leave them a little bit undermanned and with longer odds. But as we saw last night, a team can jump you at any point, whether it's in the beginning, middle, or end, and the Sixers wound up in control early, but then had to really fight for an all-important win last night to regain control of the Eastern Conference to themselves. The Bulls, however, as we look out over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, will they be playing beyond May 16th? Right now, it is not looking likely. They are 3 games behind 10th place in the East. And of course, that matters this year because seeds 9 and 10 in the conference get in the mix with seeds 7 and 8. I do have to pause as my brain is not used to naturally spitting that information out. There's this play-in tournament, which is brand new for this year. I can't wait for it. The Bulls were gunning for that 10th spot, but it seems like right now, Lauren, 3 games to make up with about 8 or 7 games to play. That is a steep hill to climb.
Yeah, they would need some help from those ahead of them, and they would have to be nearly perfect. A night like tonight, minus their 2 aces, probably makes that perfection a little bit difficult to achieve. But of course, in this league, you never know. You hear it from players across the league all the time. Anyone can beat anyone on any night. So I wouldn't say the Bulls are completely out of it. I'm a little biased. That was my home prior to the Sixers. But I understand what you're saying. Not looking too great for the Bulls in the East this year, but an exciting future for their young group for sure.
Chicago and the Sixers have met twice already this season. The Sixers won both games. The last time, if I'm not mistaken, neither Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid played in that one. That was at United Center. And here's a look at some of the highlights from that game. And then, of course, Lauren, the first matchup between these two teams, it was the 50-piece McNugget for the MVP favorite, Joel Embiid.
Yeah, you're spot on, Seltz. Neither the Sixers All-Stars, Ben Simmons nor Joel Embiid, available in this one, but 7 Sixers still finished in double figures. Tobias Harris led the way with 24 points in this one, and they still were able to win just as handily as they did when Joel had that 50-piece at the center a little bit earlier on in the season. It's been 2 pretty dominant wins for the Sixers. They'll look to make it a regular season series sweep tonight in Chicago.
I feel it. I feel it tingling on the wrist. Still have not mastered the inverted application and wearing of this, but it is my Tissot Chrono XL NBA Special Edition. It is telling me it is time for the Tissot Keys to the Game. What is your timepiece, Lauren, telling you tonight?
Seltz, my Tissot PR100 also seems to say that it's time for the keys to the game.
Is there a gold finish on that? I feel like this is the first time that through our video screen I'm noticing that.
I've got a rose gold finish on this.
Oh.
I love this watch. I wear this watch a lot. I don't just wear this watch for the show. This watch makes me feel very classy, very cool. So thank you, Tissot.
I'm in a similar spot as you. I also wear this around. It's got the NBA Spalding Ball leather band. It makes me feel casual yet somewhat punctual. Cash punch. It's the new look for dads in their mid-30s. What can I say?
Love that for you, Self.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's do a key. Why don't we?
All right, let's do it. I will go first. My key to the game, for probably the 4th time in as many games, is pretty simple. I said bring the heat. In the Sixers' first 3 wins in this 4-game winning streak, they had the largest 3-game win differential with 97 cumulative points in those 3 wins. They were so dominant at home, and then of course went to San Antonio and struggled a little bit to bring that heat and that fire and that dominance that they pride themselves on. If they bring out the heat early, shut them down on the defensive end, hopefully they can get back into that lopsided win column that they were living in last week.
Excellent. My key tonight, cleanup duty in the sense of the Sixers just clean up some stuff from last night. Thought as the game went on, they weren't as strong on the interior in the paint, both offensively and defensively. They gave up some points in transition. So I think for the Sixers at this stage of the season, it's all about taking what happens in a game and then trying to refine it and clean it up within the context of how do we become the best version of ourselves in time for the playoffs. So my key is cleanup duty. Just take the cloth, put a little spritz on it, polish, get the shine. As shiny as you can shine it.
I'm all about it, Seltz. I think if they listen to you and I, we should be pretty good.
Of course. I mean, we tell the time right with our Tissots. We try to give you some keys that you can sink your teeth into.
It's a low bar, but we manage to surpass it every night. So,
speaking of bars, I'm not sure what category this would fall into. as we thank Tissot for bringing us the keys to tonight's game. We came out with our latest edition of our Monday podcast in the 76ers Podcast Network, Mailbag Monday. It's when we take your inquiries, comments, questions, and respond, whether you send them in on social or you hit us up on the pod line, 215-403-PODS. Put it in your phone, save it, call us whenever. But today, a very special edition. Again, I don't know what type of bar we're setting with this, but we had a special guest. Why don't we roll tape on that, Lauren, and then we can react. All right, so here we go. We're going to run through the 4 finalists in no particular order. The FurCon Crazies, the Furkheads, the Furkaholics, and last but not least, the Corkestra. What do we think, Furk? FurCon Crazies, Furkheads, Furkaholics, Corkestra. We were going to ask you to make the final selection.
I will take Corkestra.
The Corkestra. We have a winner. The Corkestra, it is. Angelic Sound. So the backstory on that is we got submissions from fans over the last couple of weeks after a series of really good games that FERC put together on names for the Standing for FurCon fan group. And we were like, we just got to go straight to the source to get the final verdict.
I think we just didn't feel comfortable choosing ourselves. That's not really part of my job description, but FurCon, I think, should feel empowered to lead his own Corkestra. So if you haven't listened to this edition of Mailbag Monday, please check it out on the Sixers Podcast Network. We had a lot of fun talking to Furk. You just got a taste there in that clip, but he was a little bit more loquacious than maybe he came off in that one. Always great to hear from him. He's such a funny dude and just brings so much joy to this team, to this city, and to our podcast for sure.
I mean, look at that. Is there a more joyous man who now has his own musical accompaniment? The Corkestra. Yes. He does support the content like no other. He is all in. And honestly, I kept going back and forth on who in the conversation was enjoying it more and had the better reactions, whether it was you or Furk, because your reactions just sitting there listening, taking it in, priceless. And then him at the end with the baby fist pumps. That was pretty good too.
Furk tickles my funny bone. He knows how to make me laugh. He's been doing it since I got here, and I was more nervous starting out in the organization. He's always made me feel comfortable, always makes us laugh. So a pleasure to see Furk as successful as he's been this season. A pleasure to see him become, as you said, such an ally of the content. This, by the way, I believe was the day after our very own, shout out to Alex Subers for capturing that beautiful moment between Furkan and Matisse. Matisse was doing a post-game interview. Furkan came over to pour some water on him. And if you haven't seen those photos, you need to either go to the Sixers social media or to Alex Subers social media to check that out immediately, because Furkan's face while pouring water on his teammate is the happiest face I've maybe ever seen, Seltz.
It was fantastic. Only a photo could do it justice, and fortunately, a photo captured it. I think we might need to, at some point, post the full video of our chat, the excerpt from today's Mailbag Monday pod with Furk, as we deliberated, we presented and rolled out the submissions for the nicknames for his fan groups, and then we deliberated a bit and then chatted for a little bit more. So I think maybe we'll try and get that up there. Stay tuned. More to come on that front. But it was a lot of fun.
That's gotta be forthcoming content, Seltz. It was too much fun to keep to ourselves.
All right. We thank Ryan Coletti, Trevor Gaffney on the sticks, per usual. Thank you, Lauren Rosen. Thanks to everyone for streaming along with us. 76ers and the Bulls running top of the hour as the Sixers try to win a 5th straight and improve to 2-0 on this 3-game road trip. We'll talk Wednesday.